In this presentation, I'm going to dig deep into experts and expertise. It is pretty difficult to say that you can have a true expert without true expertise. That is very basic. This presentation will focus significantly on medical expertise, but it might touch on other issues as well. Now, these slides will have a lot of text because I want viewers to be able to think about what is said and not have to take too much notes. That means they could rewind the presentation at any stage, stop it, take screenshots, take photographs, whatever they want to do. Now, the importance of expertise is that people go to experts for lots of different kinds of advice or guidance, and they're presumed to have expertise, but how do you know that the person you're going to has that real expertise? There are lots of fakes out there. Experience is important in gaining expertise, but it is not a simple matter, as I will show later on. Here we go into experience. I'm not likely to read all of these texts for you, but I wanted to talk to the slides and the items. It's obviously about the quality of the experience. Poor quality experience doesn't make for good expertise. Truly trained experts would have had a lot of reflection and learning. They would update their knowledge regularly. Development of skill is important to experts. It is not just about knowledge. The skills need to be deliberately practiced and developed over time. So experts should not remain static in their knowledge or their skill. And experts, the good ones, try to avoid cognitive biases that they may have, or being influenced by other people's biases. They are very cautious. So whilst expertise is a vital component, experience is a vital component of expertise, it is not the only factor. In other words, a person could have 25 years of experience but be no better than another expert who has 5 years of experience, because it depends on a whole lot of knowledge development and skill development and practice skill development, and then overcoming biases. So what are the defining features of expertise? They have that deep knowledge, a really comprehensive understanding. They will be updating that knowledge all the time, and they understand not just the basics but the nuances and the complexities of their subject matter. They need that experience, and that is necessary to recognize patterns, apply knowledge in practical contexts, and make informed decisions. Sometimes quickly, but sometimes not quickly. But certainly they want to make reasonably accurate decisions based on any evidence they will have seen or studied, and they would have also evaluated the evidence to see how good it is. They develop skill through the practice and application of their knowledge, and they can certainly work more effectively and efficiently than non-experts. They can solve problems, difficult problems sometimes, nebulous problems, ones that ordinary people may have difficulty understanding. Experts are usually recognized by others in their field. That might come from a curriculum vitae or a resume, but one should be cautious about that, because a list of these things doesn't necessarily mean that they have the skill or the skills required to be applied to a particular problem or difficulty that you might have. So at this point, if you're thinking about evaluating the expertise of an expert, it's not easy business. One has to do that research on their expert. Sometimes people assume that because an expert is appointed, such as a doctor or a consultant, that they have the skills and knowledge, etc. That's not necessarily true either. They may have a certain level of training and a certain level of experience and knowledge, but still not be able to apply themselves very well. So it's a very tricky situation for an ordinary person, such as a patient, to evaluate the expertise of their doctor. And experts are also generally good teachers, and they can explain complex things, break them down into a way that can be understood by ordinary people. And they don't just give analogies that sell a story or sell an understanding. I've seen that happen, and ordinary people tend to think, well, if that makes sense and sounds good, then this person is good. That's not necessarily true. A good expert will take time to reference what they're thinking and show you what they're doing, and not rely too much on analogies. That's my opinion. They have this intuitive understanding of their field, which is difficult to really explain, but it's because their knowledge runs deep that it becomes second nature, and they can't put their finger on a piece of knowledge because it's so vast. But the whole collection of that knowledge comes to weigh automatically almost on what they're thinking or analyzing. I'll go into intuition a bit deeper in a little while. So I want to dig further into the developmental pathway to expertise. So this is to show how that knowledge, skill and experience is acquired, how it's refined. The refining is the big thing. It's becoming like a fine wine or a fine bit of scotch or gin or whatever you like. It's really getting it right. So it's not surprising they need to acquire all this knowledge, basic concepts, principles and so on. And oftentimes an expert will go back to basics. This is the interesting thing. They will go back to basics. They won't necessarily become very complicated. They won't neglect the basics. And that practical experience I was telling you about is very important. But that experience will be deliberate. It will be in a variety of situations, and they will make errors and learn, of course, hopefully, Those errors will not be catastrophic errors or life-threatening errors, but they will self-correct and learn. There's no way an expert can develop expertise without making mistakes. They will reflect from their learning experience and see where they could have done things better. They will make notes. They will work out how to become better if they meet the same situation or a similar challenging situation. This is about advanced learning and skills development. This means that they continue to read, to study, to expand their horizons, to think deeply about difficult cases or situations. And deliberate practice is an important issue. It is about focused, goal-oriented practice with almost immediate feedback, so that the learning is rich. And arising from all of that stuff then comes that intuitive and tacit knowledge. So it does take time to develop on this pathway to expertise, but time in itself is not a big issue, as you will see in a minute. This is about continuous learning and adaptation. I think I covered that already. And I won't spend long on this slide. It's very busy. You can go back and look at these models and understand how deliberate practice and skill acquisition comes about, and look at the development under Dreyfus and Dreyfus about how people become experts and so on. So I won't go into this in any detail. It's not necessary here, but you can come back to it later on. I did want to mention intuition, because sometimes an expert just has a deep insight into something and they can't put their finger on exactly why they think what they think. I know I've put in the word quick here, but sometimes the expertise is not applied quickly and decisions are not always made quickly. That is because of the deep amount of analytical thought process that may need to go into it. Now, intuition is not about just having a hunch in the layperson's sense, because people have hunches that they can't explain as well. But this is about an intuitive feeling that is based on that rich knowledge, skill, and experience. And sometimes a customer will have to rely on that. Of course, there's no risk-free business in managing difficult situations, and an expert is not there to guarantee you success. And we'll come into that in a minute, how experts can beat the odds, but not always. The intuition has to come in from that deep, extensive experience. Pattern recognition is extremely important. Now, an expert may recognize a pattern that a non-expert will not. An ordinary layperson may miss the pattern, but it's visible to the expert eye. They can make connections in meaningful ways that are obviously evidence-based and come up with solutions more quickly than non-experts, and the solutions are often quite novel. There's a kind of beauty to the solution when it comes, and of course when it works. And they may not be able to fully articulate. This is the nature of intuition. It's also the nature of layperson's hunches, but this is not layperson's hunches. It's not infallible. Experts are human. They can get it wrong. Nobody can predict the future, but their expert insight and intuition, as you will see, can beat the odds. So I just mentioned pattern recognition. You could pause this later on. This is about automatic, how things become automatic with them, so they don't have to exert as much effort. And adaptive decision making is about how they can draw on their intuition to make judgments when there's no clear right or wrong answer in complex situations. This is about the knowledge, that big body of knowledge that is silent in the background, written inside of them, and they can't really hit exactly on it. They might have a memory of something, and then they can go and check it up later if they need to. And this is where we get into time. And this business about 10,000 hours has been thrown around for several years, and it's like on social media where something becomes repeated 10,000 or more times, and before long that gets so common an idea or knowledge that everybody accepts it as a truth. Well, it's not true, because the original concept was from Anders Ericsson, and Anders Ericsson did not say that 10,000 hours was a valid rule. So somebody way back took that 10,000 hours he might have mentioned in some context and made it into a rule. So the time spent in gaining expertise varies across different fields. Okay, and there are individual differences because people learn at different rates and need to practice harder. Some have a natural ability, etc. Some don't, and all that stuff. It's about that quality of practice that might take more or less time. It's the kind of supervision. It's about the kind of learning from errors or mistakes. And there are other factors that are important. The learning environment, for example, the expert's motivation, and persistence, meaning how long they stick at a difficult situation and develop that expertise. So time and practice, this is what Anders Ericsson was saying about deliberate practice, and he didn't claim it was 10,000 hours, as I mentioned before. And there's a wide variation about deliberate practice, explaining performance and the variations in performance in various areas. The point is that deliberate practice is important in doing the time, but it's not the only factor that contributes to expertise. And these are some cognitive and behavioral characteristics of sound experts. They, instead of just thinking about expertise in terms of thousands of hours of time in acquiring that expertise, when you meet an expert, they take time with you, or if not with you, in studying the things they need to study. They dig deep and wide. Okay? And they do work against the odds. They beat the odds compared to somebody without expertise. That's what you would want. You would want, in going to an expert, to have a better chance of being better off or winning at whatever venture you may be going into. Financial world and investing, I don't need to go into that. Certainly in the field of medicine, There are all kinds of doctors, but not every doctor is an expert in every field. So you wouldn't expect a general practitioner to have the expertise of a brain surgeon. That's just a natural thing to say, because a GP is not studying the field of neurology or neurosurgery in the way that somebody who is specializing in that field. And I can't go any deeper into that. It's just very basic. They're experts in sports, and you know about that. You know how hard athletes have to train to win, okay? And how coaches have that deep understanding of the sport and can advise their athletes. Science and engineering, this is again very basic, but you know, they can win in developing spacecraft, aircraft, you know, lots of inventions. And we know about the world of art and music, how they create amazing works. It's not by accident. It's through that rich experience. Now, yes, there are a few new artists who will get lucky, but more times than not, the really amazing artists repeatedly create absolutely exceptional work. And as I was saying, there's no guarantee that experts will beat the odds every time. But if, for example, an expert is making a 20% improvement over the odds in an area where non-experts are likely to lose, then that might be seen as success. So the context of the chance of improvement is also important. Now, this is a big area, and some people will say this is controversial, but we are now into an AI era, and AI systems will have access to large bodies of information, and they control that and pick out things and demonstrate knowledge. The question is whether they can really understand what they're doing, whether they have actual skill is another matter, and their potentials for bias, because they can be biased by what they're presented with, whereas human experts are a bit more cautious with those biases. The good ones, the good experts, I mean. And human experts can verify information and check things more carefully, step outside the box, whereas artificial intelligence is trapped within a box of sorts. And of course, human experts can think about these matters far more deeply than artificial intelligence. Brittleness, I won't go into that, but AI systems can fail in some phenomenal ways, and that needs some checking out on the internet about how AI has failed. Okay, I'm not saying AI is a bad thing. I think it's in development of a new kind of expertise or simulated expertise, but it's not theirs yet. And creativity and emotional intelligence are not really the forte of AI systems. So human beings with their expertise in various fields are still very valuable. One should be very cautious about plugging questions and seeking advice from something like ChatGPT on medical conditions or medications, for example. So I want to wrap this up and draw some conclusions. Expertise must be real and valid. The expert industry, in quotes, the whole field of experts is filled with fakes. I don't know how full, but there are loads of them. People who seek out expertise from experts have a duty to themselves to check the expertise, ask the experts questions about their qualification, about their training, about their skill. And a genuine expert will definitely relish that, take the time, and explain how they acquired their expertise. And not only that, if after you accept, cautiously that they do have that expertise, you can then ask them your questions about your problem, and they will usually give you generous time. Experience alone, as I said, does not define expertise, and I won't go back into that. Please rewind this presentation and look at that. How the knowledge, skill, experience were acquired, extremely important. The kind of deliberate practice, the kind of supervision, the kind of feedback, the kind of professional development, and so on, extremely important. Yes, experts can beat the odds, but they're not infallible. So in taking any form of advice, you are taking a chance, the expert is taking a chance, and no expert can predict the future. And that's the nature of life. Artificial intelligence systems may provide a lot of knowledge. However,